Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be thinking about using chords in the natural minor. So let's just be very clear what we're talking about here. If I'm talking about A natural minor, this is the scale. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. So you could say, great, I know what a natural minor is, it just uses the white notes. Well, not quite. So let's think about what's the difference. Well, if I was going to use a scale of D natural minor, I'd have to think of it like this. D minor is related to F major because every minor key has a major that's related to it, and of course vice versa. Why are they related? Because they use the same key signature. So F major uses a B flat. Why does it use a B flat? Because all major scales go tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So we end up with a B flat in F major. Every major scale has a relative minor that's a third below it, specifically a minor third below it. So that means D minor. So D natural minor goes D to D, but it uses that B flat. So that will be D natural minor. So if you only use whatever sharps or flats appear in the relative major, then that's what you use in the natural minor. Now, when you get into other kinds of minor scales, like the harmonic minor and the melodic minor, that ground begins to change. So if we go back to A minor for a moment, A minor, A natural minor, doesn't use any sharps or flats because it's related to C major, which doesn't have any sharps or flats in it. So there's A natural minor. If I was going to deal with A harmonic minor, I would use that scale, but I would raise the 7th degree of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's number 7. So G becomes G sharp. So there is A harmonic minor. If I was going to deal with A melodic minor, I would start off in exactly the same way, and I would raise number 6. So F becomes F sharp, and raise number 7. So G becomes G sharp. But when I come down in the natural minor. And in much of the music that's been brought to us since 1600, we've been writing chords that have essentially used the harmonic minor, and we've written melodies that have essentially used the melodic minor, and then sometimes there has to be a bit of compromise to make those two things fit each other. But it's perfectly reasonable to write music using the natural minor scale. And certainly during the 20th century and forwards into the current century, it's become slightly more popular in certain styles to work with a natural minor. So what does that mean for chords? Well, whatever we're doing in terms of the scale, then we're going to use the same notes for the chord. So we've got the scale of A natural minor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And you can see that's constituting the bottom notes of this scale. And then to form your chords, you add a third and a fifth above. That's exactly what you would do in a major scale, a major key, or the harmonic or the melodic minor. It's the same in the natural minor. So chord 1 is A, C, E. Chord 2, B, D, F. Chord 3, C, E, G. Chord 4, D, F, A. Chord 5, E, G, B. Chord 6, F, A, C. Chord 7, G, B, D. And then we don't call it chord 8 because really we're just coming back to chord 1. It's just an octave higher, back to that A, C, E. So that's how we form our triads. And then we can make chords from those triads just by using the notes of the particular triad. So if you're kind of used to working with chords in a minor key, well, it may well be that you've always been kind of shown how to do this in the harmonic minor scale. So no big deal, but in the harmonic minor scale of A, we have a G sharp. So you might think, okay, that's no big deal. I have to replace G sharp with G natural. That's true. You might be thinking it only affects one note of the scale, so that's not a big deal either. However, G appears in 3 chords, doesn't it? Because you've got G there, you've got G there, you've got G there. So actually, it slightly changes the landscape in 3 chords of our scale. If I'm working in A harmonic minor, chord 1 is the same as it is in the natural minor, A, C, E. Chord 2 is the same, B, D, F, but chord 3 is different. In A harmonic minor, I've got C, E, G sharp, and that makes this an augmented chord. But actually in A natural minor, it's a G natural. Suddenly, it's a kind of slightly more serene major chord, isn't it? So a lot of people are taught, whatever you do, avoid chord 3 in a minor key if you're dealing with a harmonic minor, because you've got that rather dramatic augmented thing. Actually, in the natural minor, chord 3 is a major chord, so no hassle there, is there? Okay, well, chord 4 is the same, D, F, A. Chord 5 in A harmonic minor is E, G sharp, B. But in A natural minor, of course, it's E, G natural, B. That has quite a strong implication, actually, because when we're dealing with a harmonic minor, we're very used to the sound of this chord, chord 5, otherwise known as the dominant chord, because it's so strong in any key, that it's often heard as major. So we hear a major chord 5, an E major chord, followed by an A minor chord. But in the natural minor, that chord 5 becomes minor because it's got G natural in it. So it gives the whole thing a very different feeling. So it's really that G natural in chord 5 that makes quite a big difference. Chord 6 is just the same, F, A, C, so whether you're natural minor or harmonic minor, it doesn't make any difference. Chord 7, if you're in the harmonic minor, of course, is G sharp at the bottom, B, D. So once we're in the natural minor, it's G natural, B, D. And that suddenly goes from being a diminished chord to being a major chord. So you can hear already how these things do have certain implications. So if you're working in the harmonic minor, the strange thing is there are only 2 minor chords. You've got chord 1 and chord 4. They're the only minor chords in the harmonic minor scale. Chord 5 and 6 are major chords, and then chord 2 and 7 are diminished chords, and chord 3 is an augmented chord. So that's an interesting kind of blend of things. If we go through the natural minor then, chord 1 is minor, that's the same. Chord 2 is diminished, that's the same. Chord 3 is major, not augmented. Chord 4 is minor, that's the same. Chord 5 is minor, so that's different because it would be major in the harmonic minor. Chord 6 is the same, major chord. Chord 7 again becomes a major chord in the natural minor rather than the diminished thing. So you see how this changes the landscape. We've said about chord 5, E minor in the natural minor instead of an E major chord, but we've kind of squeezed out some of the difficulties of the harmonic minor, with chord 3 becoming major and chord 7 becoming major, instead of chord 3 being slightly awkward to deal with because it's augmented, chord 7 being slightly awkward to deal with because it's diminished. So actually it gives us a different pattern: minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major, back to minor. So in some ways, working with the chords of the natural minor scale becomes slightly easier to deal with. So if you've never worked with chords with harmony in the natural minor, this might be something that grabs your interest. Okay, well, let's just look at a possible musical example here. So what I've done here is that I've written a melody in 6/8 time using A natural minor, and the melody goes like this. So that's a slightly folky kind of melody, I suppose. But there's a melody. And what I'm trying to show here, without making life too complicated, is that we can harmonize this melody in a quite straightforward way, just using the primary chords. So chord 1, 4, 5. So in A minor, that's the A minor chord, the A, C, E. Chord 4 is D, F, A. Chord 5 is E, G, B. And then I've written some harmony to go with that just says, well, we could go from chord 1 in A minor to chord 5 in E minor. You're hearing that minor chord instead of the major chord that you might have in A harmonic minor. So chord 1 A minor, chord 5 E minor, back to chord 1 in A minor, then a D minor chord in first inversion, a D minor / F chord, or 4B, or you might know it as 4/6, 4 in first inversion. Then cadencing on this chord 5, so minor chord, an E minor chord. Going on to the third bar, the third measure on the second line, a D minor chord or a chord 4. Going to a chord 1, an A minor chord. Going back to a chord 5, an E minor chord. And then I'm just adding a 7th in this tenor part, just to show that you can add that 7th quite happily to the chord 5, finishing on the chord 1, the A minor chord. Okay, so how does that come together? So it gives it that slightly kind of sort of modal flavour, doesn't it? Now, would it have been possible to have harmonised that melody in the key of A minor using the harmonic minor? Well, yes, it would be. You'd probably want to use a G sharp in the melody there to make it work, but it could work like this in the harmonic minor. Okay, now hear it again in the natural minor. And you can hear they have two slightly different flavours. You might have a preference for one over the other, probably because of what you're used to and your own kind of background in playing music and musical taste. But it's very useful to be able to sort of think, well, could I handle that using a harmonic minor? But could I also handle it using a natural minor? And actually to discover some of the pros and cons in it. And there are certainly many pros in using the natural minor. If you want to have that kind of slightly folky feel to something, or you're writing in a style that tends to use the natural minor, but you're just sort of thinking, but what happens to things like the chord 5? Because, you know, it's a minor chord instead of a major chord. Is that all right? Well, hopefully we've covered the ground in this video, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of courage in venturing into harmonizing some music and writing some melodies using the natural minor scale and the chords that result from that. So I hope that's been helpful in kind of encouraging you towards the natural minor. Well, if it has been useful to you and maybe you're a songwriter, you might be interested in our creative songwriting course, which covers songwriting of all sorts of different styles down the ages from 1600 onwards, and embracing modern styles as well as more conventional styles. So if that's something that you think, oh, that sounds interesting, go to our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk, click on courses, and all sorts of courses that might interest you there. But if you scroll through that, you'll come across the creative songwriting course, and that includes some work using natural minor.